Our story begins with a guy named Haruto who had a rough time in junior high. The bullying he faced had a lasting impact on him, leading him to become a shut-in. This pattern continued into his adult life, and he lost hope for his future, living aimlessly without any purpose. One fateful day, while lying in bed and watching anime on his phone, something extraordinary happened. A strange light emanated from the device, and before he knew it, he was transported to a different dimension. There, he was greeted by a goddess who congratulated him and informed him that he had been chosen for reincarnation. Haruto was initially confused but soon realized that it meant he had passed away in his room when he saw the light. The goddess revealed that he would be sent to a new world where magical abilities were everything. To help him in his new life, she granted him overpowered skills and advised him to make the most of this opportunity. However, Haruto had other plans. He wanted to live a peaceful and quiet life, using his newfound abilities to enjoy his preferred shut-in lifestyle. With his decision made, he pleaded with the goddess to reincarnate him. In a flash of light, he regained consciousness, but this time in the body of a baby. Surprisingly, he still retained his sense of self from his previous life, so he couldn't help but complain a little about having to start from infancy. As he lay there, Haruto was soon surrounded by smiling faces. The king was informed that his wife had given birth to a healthy baby boy, and everyone rejoiced. Haruto was delighted to learn that he had been born into royalty. Shortly after his birth, a sorceress arrived with an orb to assess his magical aptitude. The king expected his son to have a high level of mana, given his lineage, but to everyone's surprise, Haruto was only a level 2 and didn't possess any elemental powers. This meant he could only use barrier magic. The king and queen couldn't believe that their prime genetics had seemingly produced such a disappointment. They worried about what their subjects would think if they found out about their underwhelming child. So, they quickly decided to declare that their son hadn't survived the birth and ordered him to be disposed of in a faraway forest. Even the sorceress found this extreme, but the king silenced her and sent the baby away. Unrecognized to them, the goddess watched on frustrated, realizing that no one recognized Haruto's true power. The measuring device in this world only went up to double digits, and she had also forgotten to give him an element. The goddess informed her colleague that she had set Haruto's level to 1002, and the other goddess scolded her for overdoing the overpowered image this time. Meanwhile, Haruto found himself abandoned in a baby basket deep in the forest. Though he struggled to move due to his age, he decided to teach himself how to use barrier magic. To his surprise, it was easier than he expected. He created a cube-like shape, using magic, and played around with it. He then levitated himself using the barrier, realizing its versatility and minimal mana consumption. His joy was short-lived when a flame wolf suddenly appeared and attacked him. However, his barrier protected him, proving to be incredibly sturdy. Haruto decided to create smaller barriers and hurled them at the wolf, but it didn't do much damage. He then came up with the idea to create barriers around the trees and pulled them down on the creature. Although it did more damage, the wolf managed to get back up. In a last-ditch effort, Haruto took a chunk of earth and brought it down on the wolf. Just before the land mass hit, the wolf surrendered, surprising Haruto by speaking. To his further astonishment, he discovered that the wolf was a female. They both calmed down, and the wolf confessed that she had planned to eat him to replenish her lost mana. However, she was impressed by Haruto's strength and couldn't bring herself to harm him. Unable to respond verbally, Haruto created a barrier that turned his thoughts into sound. He introduced himself as Haruto, preferring to use that name instead of his birth name due to pronunciation difficulties. He explained the events that led to his current predicament. The wolf, named Flay, sensed that Haruto's mana far exceeded human limits, leading her to believe he was the reincarnated Demon King. In a bid to sound cooler, Haruto accepted the title of Demon King, surprising Flay. Haruto realized how gullible Flay was, as she even rolled over, ready to be defeated by him. Finding her behavior excessive, he promised not to harm her if she didn't attack him. Touched by his generosity, Flay pledged not to attack him and addressed him as Lord. Haruto bestowed upon her the name Flay and formed a pact with her, making him her master. Despite his shock at this turn of events, Haruto collapsed due to a lack of breast milk. He informed Flay of his issue, and she transformed into a human female, hoping to assist her new master. However, her efforts were in vain, and they engaged in a conversation interrupted by the sound of someone approaching. To ensure their privacy, Haruto created a barrier that allowed him to communicate with Flay without the stranger hearing them. He instructed Flay to ask who was approaching, and a man named Gold stepped forward, expressing his intention to take Haruto. Flay immediately refused, not even giving him a chance to explain. Gold questioned her right to refuse, but she informed him that Haruto had become her master, making him belong to her. Haruto was puzzled because he didn't recall agreeing to this arrangement. Gold revealed that the child belonged to a relative of his, and he had come to reclaim him after the circumstances that led to his abandonment had played out. Flay couldn't understand why the family would come back for something they had abandoned. Gold tried to show his concern by offering a pouch of breast milk, which made Haruto happy. However, Flay didn't listen and refused it. Gold then narrated a tragic story of how he and his wife had lost their baby in the past. He believed that every child who survived the dangerous ordeal of birth deserved a chance to live. Touched by this sad tale, Flay agreed to the terms and conditions, becoming Gold's attendant. To seal the deal, Gold destroyed the baby's basket, making it appear as though wild animals had attacked Haruto. 9 years passed, and an older Haruto joined his new family for breakfast, greeting everyone with a cheerful "good morning." He revealed that his original plan was to leave as soon as he was no longer reliant on breast milk. However, his adopted family had been so kind to him that he decided to stay. Although his younger sister, Char, still seemed a bit distant, he hoped to change that. Flay had faithfully played her role as Haruto's assistant over the years. Haruto found it peculiar that Char was more open to Flay and eager to play with her. Recognizing Char as his priority, Haruto ordered Flay to play with his younger sister. As he watched them play outside, his mother joined him and commented on Char's distance, attributing it to the girl not knowing how to act around boys. Haruto pondered whether Char could sense his true age and felt a bit downcast. His mother consoled him, suggesting that he show Char he could be a reliable older brother. She reminded him that as the heir to their estate, he should spend more time outside instead of locking himself in his room. She promised to do everything in her power to ensure that they got along. Haruto headed to his room, lying in bed as he contemplated his escape. Standing over him was a clone of himself, a project he had been working on for 9 years. He had studied barrier magic extensively to create this realistic robot copy, though he hadn't been able to make it talk or move. He realized that if he wanted to leave without causing sadness, he would have to create a clone of Flay as well, a whole new challenge. His thoughts were interrupted when Gold knocked on his door, asking him to come with him for a moment. Haruto knew this wouldn't end well for him. Gold led him to a training compound and informed him that he would be teaching him how to use a sword. Haruto made it obvious with a grumpy face that he wasn't interested, but Gold pointed out his low mana level and the need to develop other skills. Gold asked Haruto if he had any interest in other fields, and though tempted to reveal his love for being a shut-in, he mentioned his interest in studying ancient magic instead. Gold was surprised by Haruto's potential and handed him a wooden sword, suspecting an affinity for swordsmanship. Haruto noticed the aura emanating from Gold and realized that his adopted father was a seasoned warrior known as the earth-shattering Warhammer. Knowing he couldn't land a hit on Gold, Haruto put up a barrier to compensate for his alleged poor physical abilities. He made an attack, which Gold barely dodged. The impact shattered Haruto's blade, leaving a crater. Gold, astonished, decided to test his suspicions further. Charging at Haruto, he launched an attack, but Haruto effortlessly dodged it with style. Gold was taken aback, as it should have been impossible for someone under level 30 to dodge like that. Haruto himself felt that something was off about himself. He remembered using an orb that measured mana in the hundreds, hoping he would be at that level. However, it still showed as red. Disappointed, he couldn't fathom having a level in the thousands, considering that 77 was the highest recorded level among humans. Unbeknownst to him, the goddess had made him overpowered, and his lack of an element made him extremely efficient in using magic. Haruto wondered if this overpowered skill was what the goddess had granted him. Gold suspected that Haruto might have an innate awakening but kept his theory to himself. He proposed they continue training to turn Haruto into an elite swordsman. Meanwhile, Char watched them, overhearing her parents' conversation about the possibility of Haruto being a demon and their concern about Flay's protectiveness over him. Char was certain that her brother wasn't a demon, and her parents discussed the mysterious powers of the royal insignia. Regardless of the truth, they promised to protect Haruto and provide him with a happy life. Within his chamber, Haruto is left confused as to why his father no longer pays him regular visits. He assumes that his father must be preoccupied with some other matter, a notion he's quite alright with, as it excuses him from his vigorous swordsmanship drills. Suddenly, his ears catch a commotion outside. A maid, frantic and flustered, is searching for dressings and antiseptics to treat the wounded. Intrigued and worried, Haruto activates his enchanted monitoring system. What he discovers sends a jolt of surprise through him. The castle's soldiers have returned from battle, their bodies damaged and broken. The support staff is doing everything they can, but it's not enough. Feeling a heavy weight in his chest, Haruto seeks his father, finding him in quiet isolation. Gold explains that a recent surge in bandit attacks has plagued the province. He had managed to get intel on the thieves' base, planning to eradicate them once and for all. Despite thorough preparations, his men were caught off guard, ambushed by the bandits. Haruto's father's hand tightens into a fist as the weight of the failure sinks in. It has not only wounded his men, but also their morale. Thinking this seemed too grim for Haruto's young eyes, he suggests the boy return to his room. Haruto remains silent and steps back, while his mind is filled with countless thoughts. As he leaves, Haruto stumbles upon Flay, giggling and making light of the royal soldier's defeat. He sees her childish glee as disrespectful, losing his temper and telling her to seal her lips. As they part ways, Haruto stealthily employs his healing magic, mending the injured soldiers' bodies to everyone's amazement, including his father's. Retiring for the night, Haruto wakes to find Flay devotedly standing outside his room, silent. He asks her if she's been there all night, to which she doesn't reply. Realizing that she's only obeying his previous order, he grants her permission to speak, expressing his regret for his previous outburst. Flay, misinterpreting his actions, feels guilty and apologizes. Haruto brushes the incident off and guides Flay to the castle rooftop. There, he unveils his magical surveillance of the province, expressing his intention to find the bandits who attacked his father and the soldiers, and bring them to justice. With Flay's assistance, they discover a gang of bandits partying deep within the forest, in the company of some strangely familiar faces dressed in soldiers' attire. Putting two and two together, they realize that the bandits must have had a tip-off from inside the castle. Taking matters into their own hands, Haruto and Flay employ their flight magic and head for the forest. Watching them from a window, Haruto's younger sister is left pondering the true nature of her brother. Meanwhile, in the forest, the bandits reveal that the soldiers' captain is a mole, plotting against Haruto's father. Just in time to hear the revelation, Haruto casts an immobilizing spell on their enemies. They learn that these soldiers belonged to the neighboring empire and had been spreading chaos within their kingdom in the guise of bandits. The pair can't fathom how these enemies managed to cross the heavily guarded border, only to discover that an accomplice had assisted their intrusion. Seeing this as a direct threat to his father's life, Haruto expresses an artificial sense of gratitude to the spies but does not intend to show them mercy. He orders Flay to set the fort ablaze as a punishment for their ambush, leaving no evidence of their visit. They depart quietly, Hart planning to inform his father anonymously about the day's events. The following day, an anonymous letter enlightens Haruto's father about the spy infiltration and the bandits' eradication. The elder man, having suspected something wrong after the ambush, is not surprised but troubled. He instructs his advisor to extract more information from the spies, preparing for the worst. His daughter, Charlotte, suspects the involvement of Haruto and Flay, decides to approach Flay for answers, having a feeling that she might know more. Finding Flay in a direct manner, she questions if there could be two of Haruto, as she'd spotted him soaring with Flay. Based on her knowledge, Haruto shouldn't have the mana required to take flight. Hence, she decided to visit his quarters to inspect and discovered him in deep slumber, like a baby. Charlotte shares that she didn't detect the usual ominous aura radiating from the slumbering Haruto, leading her to think he might be a look-alike. Flay is surprised by the young girl's sharp observation and confirms Haruto possesses an extraordinary power beyond human limitations. Charlotte praises the extraordinary nature of her dear Haruto, yet she avoids explaining the existence of the two Harutos. As a matter of fact, the Haruto that Charlotte spotted in the room was merely a magical illusion. Changing her line of questioning, Charlotte asks Flay about Haruto's true identity. Dodging the question, Flay advises Charlotte not to fuss over petty matters and advises her to focus on her own affairs if she wishes to grow up like her. Flay later lets Haruto know that Charlotte has discovered his secret outing the previous night and his magical replica. This naturally makes Charlotte suspicious of Haruto. As a result, Haruto decides to increase surveillance on Charlotte to monitor her actions, ensuring she doesn't uncover his antics once again. Later that night, Haruto leaves his room for a bathroom break, and Charlotte discreetly follows him. Noticing her tail, Haruto confronts Charlotte. However, as she spins around, Charlotte quickly makes a run for it. Later, when Haruto decides to indulge in a long, rejuvenating bath, Charlotte stealthily follows him there as well. She continues her covert operations, observing her brother while he's engaged in training, studying, chatting with Flay, and even during his bath. However, Haruto masterfully behaves like an ordinary child to keep her suspicions at bay. Following a week of surveillance by Charlotte, things begin to normalize. Haruto's mother, Natalia, decides to take Charlotte on a journey with her to attend the upcoming annual festival. Gold tells Haruto that he usually accompanies Natalia on such trips, but this year, Natalia has invited Charlotte. Haruto suggests that Natalia bring Flay along, but Natalia insists that Flay is needed for errands for Haruto. Haruto recalls that he tasked Flay with deterring the monsters in the region from attacking the nearby towns and villages. One night, Haruto's surveillance alarm, set to monitor Charlotte, wakes him up, and he senses something amiss. It seems Empire soldiers have trapped Natalia and Charlotte midway through their journey, and their own soldiers are struggling to fend them off. Natalia attempts to flee while holding Charlotte, but the Empire soldiers use their magic to apprehend them, injuring Natalia's leg. Haruto's magical spell takes control of Charlotte, guiding Natalia to escape. They rush towards a towering cliff and, with Natalia's magic, manage to descend with minimal harm. Charlotte informs Natalia about a nearby hiding place. They discover a stunning, brightly lit cave. Suspecting another's assistance in providing directions, Natalia decides to find the mystery helper, who she believes is a hero of justice. Natalia instructs Charlotte to stay inside the cave and steps outside, only to find the cave's entrance magically sealed off with illusions. The Empire soldiers coincidentally find Natalia. In a desperate act to avoid torture, Natalia attempts to end her own life with a dagger. Haruto arrives just in time to rescue her, knocking her unconscious so she won't witness his next actions. Haruto, filled with rage, defeats all the Empire soldiers in a matter of seconds. Afterwards, he carries Natalia back into the cave and camouflages his presence to remain unseen by Charlotte. He alters his voice and instructs Charlotte to care for her unconscious mother until help arrives. Charlotte recognizes the malevolent aura surrounding Haruto and wonders why he, an apparent villain, rescued them. She challenges Haruto, questioning if he is indeed a hero of justice. The question stuns Haruto, but he plays along, repeatedly agreeing. With her childlike understanding, Charlotte concludes that Haruto's powers are meant to combat evil. She steps closer to Haruto to apologize for her prior misconceptions. Haruto urges Charlotte to keep his hero persona a secret. Charlotte agrees, even promising to deceive her own father to keep Haruto's secret safe. Haruto excuses himself, claiming hero duties, but his true intention is to return to the castle before raising any suspicions. Meanwhile, at the castle, Gold is informed by his advisor about an anonymous letter concerning Natalia and Charlotte. According to the letter, both his wife and daughter are safe, escorted by Flay. Though many of Natalia's bodyguards were injured, they have all fully recovered. Gold breathes a sigh of relief and asks Haruto his thoughts on their anonymous helper. Haruto believes they are justice-seeking heroes and assures Gold that these heroes will handle the Empire's soldiers if necessary. However, this ends up being Haruto's significant mistake, as the letter did not specify whether the attackers were Empire soldiers. But before Gold can connect the dots, Haruto quickly diverts suspicion with an excuse. When Charlotte and Natalia finally return home, after warmly embracing Gold, Charlotte moves to hug her brother, something she's never done before. Charlotte bursts into Haruto's room without knocking, interrupting his surveillance of the castle. Annoyed, Haruto scolds her for not respecting his privacy. However, he soon realizes that Charlotte has been stuck by his side ever since she learned he is actually a hero, just like when she thought he was a villain. Surprisingly, Haruto enjoys having her around because it allows him to pet her whenever he wants. Charlotte notices the holographic video footage behind Haruto and asks about the sorcery involved. Haruto explains that he uses surveillance magic to keep an eye on everything, even though such magic doesn't exist in their world. To appease Charlotte's curiosity, Haruto lies and claims it's a rare and ancient form of magic. Speaking of ancient magic, Haruto admits to telling a similar lie to his father, Gold, about studying ancient and lost magic. Intrigued by the idea, Charlotte offers to help him learn more by taking him to the castle's archives, which is a magnificent library. Haruto is amazed by the wealth of knowledge contained within. Excited, Charlotte quickly selects some books and gives them to Haruto. They sit down and start reading the first book, where Haruto learns about the reactivation of ancient magic. Unlike elemental magic, ancient magic doesn't have specific attributes. This realization leads Haruto to understand that his barrier magic can also be classified as ancient magic. Charlotte mentions that although she struggles with reading, she seeks assistance from Gold, Natalia, or even Flay. She expresses her desire for Haruto's help in learning more. Before Haruto can respond, Charlotte plops herself onto his lap to get a better view of the book. Utilizing his big brother skills, Haruto assists her in reading the book and even shares interesting stories reminiscent of anime. Haruto can't help but complain about the absence of anime in their world, and Charlotte becomes intrigued. Though Haruto struggles to explain, he describes anime as drawings that can move, which Charlotte perceives as a form of magic. Enthusiastic about experiencing it, Charlotte asks Haruto to show her anime. Haruto promises to do his best, igniting his determination to find a way. Driven by his desire to please his sister, Haruto dedicates himself to gaining access to the internet. After 2 weeks of effort, he managed to gain internet access, and his subscription service to Crunchyroll was still active. Excitedly, he shows Charlotte the magical tool, and she uses it to watch her first anime. Witnessing the characters come to life astonishes Charlotte, but she struggles to comprehend the language they speak. Rather than adding subtitles, Haruto takes it upon himself to teach Charlotte the entire Japanese language. Using a language learning course, Charlotte masters the basics in less than 2 hours. With her newfound knowledge, she indulges in anime binge watching for the next 2 weeks. During this time, Charlotte becomes addicted to anime and frequently invades Haruto's room to watch more. Understanding her addiction, Haruto wants to stop her but also wants her to have fun. As the responsible older brother, he sets a limit of 3 hours of TV per day. Though it's still a considerable amount, Charlotte longs to watch anime all day. However, she obeys Haruto's request, and they share quiet meals together at the dinner table. Unfortunately, the strain of watching too much anime leads Charlotte to doze off during dinner, raising concerns from her parents. Natalia questions Haruto about Charlotte's tiredness since she spends all day in his room. Haruto covers for her by claiming they were researching ancient magic. Natalia appreciates their bonding and asks Haruto to continue looking after Charlotte. Later, Gold and his soldiers urgently leave the castle to deal with thieves causing trouble. Natalia bids him farewell and expresses her concern. In Haruto's room, Charlotte's worry for her father overrides her anime addiction. Haruto tries to comfort her, assuring her that Gold can handle the situation. Charlotte ponders why people become thieves, hoping for a world where everyone can live happily without resorting to bad deeds. Although Haruto understands her sentiment, he knows achieving universal happiness is impossible. In Charlotte's eyes, Haruto is the hero of justice, and she suggests he should kill the thieves to protect their father. Playfully, she charms him with her eyes, leaving Haruto with no choice but to assist his dad. Haruto undergoes a transformation, turning into an adult-sized character dressed in a black costume. Reluctantly, Haruto heads to the forest to find the thieves, feeling annoyed at being dragged into unnecessary conflicts. However, he can't disappoint Charlotte, so he activates his surveillance magic to locate them. Once he spots them, he uses his barrier magic to cut off their escape routes. Initially, Haruto contemplates leaving the capture to Gold and his army, but he remembers Charlotte watching him and decides to confront the thieves. Claiming to be the hero of justice, he engages in a fight with them. At first, they underestimate him, thinking he's just a clown, but Haruto teaches them a lesson with his martial arts skills and defeats them. Coincidentally, Gold and his soldiers arrive just as Haruto finishes the fight. Surprised by Haruto's appearance, Gold questions if he defeated all the thieves alone. Haruto hesitates to answer, and Gold thinks he has been rude. Introducing himself, Gold asks for Haruto's name, and Haruto struggles to come up with a response, eventually settling on still pending. Gold assumes Haruto is the hero of justice who previously saved his wife and daughter. Maintaining his persona, Haruto claims to be the hero of justice, and Gold inquiries about his goals. Haruto invents a story about seeking absolute justice, leaving Gold intrigued. Exhausted, Haruto returns to his room, receiving praise from Charlotte for being cool. Though physically drained, he is happy to be the hero in his sister's eyes. The following day, Haruto decides to address Charlotte's overdependence on him. He creates a perfect clone of himself, complete with matching behavior. Impressed by the clone's responses, Haruto attributes his success to studying at the library and utilizing information from the books. Unbeknownst to Haruto, Charlotte is hiding under the bed sheets and witnesses the two identical Harutos. Confused, she wonders which one is the real Haruto. Flay interrupts, asking Haruto to be ready to depart soon, but Haruto decides to delegate the task to his clone. His clone, being just as much of a recluse as him, refuses, so Haruto decides to go himself. Meanwhile, Prince Laius and Princess Marianne visit Gold's castle. Laius complains about the condition of the place, and Marianne reprimands him, urging him to behave. Gold welcomes the royal siblings, expressing his honor at their presence. Laius becomes intrigued by Haruto, noticing his different hair color and assuming he must be adopted. Haruto contemplates whether Laius and Marianne are his true siblings, knowing he also comes from the royal family. Laius tries to assert his superiority as the future king and demands respect. Gold respectfully bows and apologizes if he unintentionally offended him. Marianne tries to rein in Laius's behavior, but he remains stubborn and insults his own sister. Amused by Laius's foolishness, Haruto wonders how someone can be so dense and glares at him. Laius notices and insults Haruto, calling him a two-piece junkie who was adopted from an orphanage. He challenges Haruto to a duel for no reason. Reluctantly, Gold complies with the demands of royalty and arranges the duel. Haruto decides to go easy on Laius and takes a beating. However, Laius demands that Haruto fight back. With a determined spirit, Haruto retaliates and overwhelms Laius. Despite Laius's attempt to use fire magic, Haruto easily counters his attacks. Irritated, Haruto displays a fraction of his true power, threatening to unleash the power of all the fireballs he has harnessed at once. Terrified, Laius admits defeat. Marianne apologizes for her brother's rudeness and expresses curiosity about Haruto's strength, as his stats suggest he should be weak. Amused, Haruto jokingly mentions being the main character, knowing it would explain his strength. This is where our tale temporarily concludes. Feel free to comment if you're interested in following more of this exciting series. Thanks for your time. If you stayed until the end, please like and subscribe for more animazing recaps.